Welcome to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Kia ora koutou and welcome. Here's another episode of the Thrive TV Show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm honoured to be joined by Carl Honoré, who is all the way from Canada and the UK, and we're talking about the slow revolution and particularly the power of slow in a fast world. So welcome, Carl. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So before we dive into looking at this, I'd love to just fire some quick fire questions at you, my this and that questions, if that's all right, before we dive into this amazing topic. So tell me, spots or stripes?
Spots.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Neither.
Ah, okay. Nice. Beachfront or mountaintop?
Mountaintop.
Okay. Would you rather go a week without your car or a week without the internet?
A week without my car.
Okay, nice. And would you rather be able to play 10 musical instruments fluently or speak 10 languages fluently?
10 languages.
Okay, nice. I'd be that one as well. And lastly, chocolate or cake?
Chocolate.
Okay, nice. I thought you might say neither then.
Yeah. Can I say both?
Yeah, you could say both. We'll go for that. So Carl Honoré is an award-winning writer, broadcaster, and two-time TED speaker. After working with street children in Brazil, he covered Europe and South America for The Economist, The Observer, the Miami Herald, the Houston Chronicle, National Post in Canada, Time and other publications. He's published in 36 languages, and his books have landed on bestseller lists around the world. While researching his first book, In Praise of Slow, which is such an incredible read, I've just been devouring it this week, he got slapped with a speeding ticket, ironically. So I love that you share that. And I'm just so excited to talk about slowness. So perhaps you can start by telling us, how did you get into what you're doing now, Carl?
Well, I think I was living in fast forward. I was so fast. Every moment of my day was a race against the clock. And I think when you get stuck in that roadrunner mode, it often takes a shock to the system or something that makes you realize that you've forgotten how to slow down and that this is doing you real harm. And for a lot of people, it's an illness. One day the body says, that's it. Cannot take the pace anymore. And you have a burnout or you can't get out of bed one morning. Mm-hmm. My wake-up call came when I started reading bedtime stories to my son. And I was just so impatient in those days that I just couldn't slow down. So I'd be speed reading Snow White, right? Like I'd be skipping lines, paragraphs. I became an expert in what I call the multiple page turn technique, where you try and sneak there. But it's like it never worked. My son knew the stories inside out. He'd catch me out. He'd say, "Daddy, why are there only 3 dwarves in the story tonight? What happened to Grumpy?" And I knew this was not the way it should be, but I just couldn't slow down. And until I caught myself flirting with a book I'd heard about called The 1 Minute Bedtime Story. So Snow White in 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I read about this book and I thought, hallelujah, I need that book now. Amazon, drone delivery. But then thankfully, light bulb over the head. And I suddenly thought, whoa, has it really come to this? Am I really in such a hurry? I'm prepared to fob off my son with a soundbite at the end of the day. And I just thought, no, I can't carry on like this. I'm racing through my life instead of living it. And that was hitting rock bottom. And that's when I stopped. And that's when I started slowing down.
It's amazing. Such a powerful story. And as a parent myself, and having done that, skipping over words, I can absolutely relate. And it can become, what I know you shared in your TED Talk, what's supposed to be this wonderful, intimate, favorite part of our day can become a battleground. And that's just one little, symptom of the roadrunner approach we're taking to life. And I have to fully admit that I am often in that space of rushing around and running late for things and trying to squeeze more in. So I'm really personally invested in today. So can you tell me, what is the slow movement all about? Let's kind of define it.
Yeah. Let's start by saying what it's not about, right? Okay. It's not about doing everything slowly. That would be absurd. I'm not an extremist of slowness. I love speed. Yeah. Faster is often better, but not always. And that is the key to unlocking this slow revolution. Because slow with a capital S is about doing things at the right speed. Musicians have a wonderful term. Mm-hmm. They talk about the tempo giusto, the correct tempo for each piece of music. And that kind of gets at what this slow culture quake is all about. It's about finding the right speed for the moment. So sometimes fast, but sometimes slowing things down, right? If you drill a little deeper into slow, it's actually a mindset. It's quality before quantity. It's being present and in the moment. It's doing one thing at a time. Do you remember when we used to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, slow is about doing everything not as fast as possible, but as well as possible, which at its core is an immensely simple idea, but a hugely powerful one because it can revolutionize and improve every single thing you do, which is why now you'll find in every field of human endeavor, from parenting to work to medicine to fashion to travel to sport, you'll find a slow movement. People coming to the task at hand and saying, how can I do this better and enjoy it more by slowing down to the right speed, to finding the right pace, the right tempo for the moment.
I love it. And I think it feels like to me a really shining light that it's not about just making everything slow, because I would find that
heaven forbid.
Yeah, exactly. That would just be really difficult. But I love that, the tempo gusto, the finding the right speed. And yeah, I mean, so much of life is about being present, isn't it? In the moment, that's where joy comes from, is when we are fully present. So tell me about, Anna, how have we got here? Why do we live in this rushing world? And what are the negatives of that?
I think there are lots of reasons why we got here. You go way back into history, and as soon as mankind or humankind began measuring time, even with sundials, we created a schedule. And once you have a schedule, you have deadlines. And once you have deadlines, you have hurry. So that's been there even before the industrial era. But then when we hit the industrial revolution, suddenly we began to create machines that could do everything faster, right? And the whole productivity culture got tied in with money. Time is money, right? That famous phrase that was uttered at the start of the industrial era. So suddenly you've got factories where the faster you do things, the more money you make. That whole ethos then spread out of factories and colonized every corner of our lives. So that now in the early 21st century, we're obsessed with optimization, with cramming more and more into less and less time. And of course, along the way, we've created more and more gadgets that allow us to do things faster and faster, like social media or smartphones, or now we've got AI coming down the pike. Yeah. So you put all of this together and it creates a world that pushes us towards acceleration. But I think there's also another angle here, which often gets forgotten in the discussion about speed culture. And it's the whole deeper side of things. It's the fact that for many of us, speed and busyness is an instrument of denial. It's a way of running away from ourselves. It's a way from not confronting the big questions, such as, who am I? What is my purpose here? Am I living the right life for me? It's easier to fill up your head with trivia and to sweat the small stuff, to grapple with the small questions like, where are my keys? I'm late for my 11 a.m. Yeah, that's a lot less frightening than sitting with yourself quietly without Netflix on, without looking at Instagram, and looking inside and saying, am I on autopilot now, or am I living as I really should be? And that's what we need to do to live a life worthy of the name. But it's frightening. It's easier just to get on that speed train and go faster and faster and get yourself busier and busier, which I think describes the way a lot of us are living these days.
And so much of it is a mindset, isn't it? And I mean, a lot of people have heard of things like the slow food movement, and just, I'm a raw food. My husband and I are raw foodies. We've lived in France. The whole way that the French approach even, purchasing your food at the market, the way you store it, the way you prepare it, the way that you eat it. It was revolutionary for me. I can remember when we lived and worked over there, and my job meant that I had an hour and 45 minutes for lunch. And I said to my boss, who was also my host dad, I'd been on exchange to France as an 18-year-old, went back in as an adult and worked for him. And I said, can I just do like a normal half hour lunch and then finish an hour or 15 minutes early? And he said, no, you've got to respect the hours. You've got to be in the office these certain times. I was like, okay. So I literally pictured that I would go there, and that in my hour and 45 minutes that I would go for bike rides, that I'd go for my run, I'd get my exercise done, I'd, read or whatever, that I do all these things. But Carl, what I ended up doing, we would travel home, 5 minutes drive, we'd finish off preparing lunch, which we usually started in the morning, and then we would sit and eat and discuss things. And then it was about 10 minutes till we were due back at work, because the enjoyment of that midday meal and just coming together. And sometimes my husband was there when he wasn't traveling to Paris to study French. He was there, or I was there with my host mum and dad. And that would just be the time that it took to have this beautiful 3-course meal, my meal of the day. And yeah, we just embraced it while we were there. And it was just so interesting to me, my mindset at the start and how that changed and how interesting it was and enjoyable it was to actually just slow down. And then we had a little cat nap, before we'd go back to the office.
Yeah. I mean, there's the art of eating well is a forgotten and lost art in many parts of the world, especially the Anglo-Saxon countries, right? And that's something that we can learn as from the English-speaking world, going to places like the Mediterranean, where they do honor food, right? They have a real culture of breaking bread together. And in fact, there is so many more benefits accrue when you take time over food, when you give food the time and attention it deserves. Obviously, you get all of that sensory pleasure of just eating good food, well made, and not in a rush. You get better nutrition, but you also get that human connection, right? There's no surprise that the English word companion comes from the two Latin words meaning with bread, because it's precisely when we break bread together that we are at our closest, right? And it's those moments that give texture, color, and meaning to a life, are those social connections. We are social animals, right? Nobody is going to lie on their deathbed and look back and say, I wish I'd spent more time in a drive-through McDonald's, right? That's just not going to happen. You're going to remember those long, leisurely lunches or that endless barbecue, things that give life real luminosity. Yeah. And they only happen. We can only enjoy them. We can only bring them about by slowing down.
I totally agree. Yeah. I love it.
There's something, can I just throw something else?
Yeah.
There's another thing that, just another thread to pull on your long lunch. You talked about having a rest. And so you would have gone back in the afternoon more productive than someone who wolfed down their sandwich at their keyboard, right? And this is something that whenever people think about slow, because there's such a deep and abiding taboo against the very idea of slowness in our culture. Slow is synonymous with lazy, unproductive, boring, roadkill, loser, right? All the negative stuff. But the truth is that if you slow down judiciously in the right moments, you're going to be much more energetic, much more creative, better able to focus, more productive, right? Yeah. Which is why, leading companies in some of the most competitive, high-speed sectors of the global economy are urging their staff to slow down during the workday, to get away from their desks and take a proper lunch break, to have a nap. Now, I'm not talking about a traditional Spanish siesta of a bottle of red wine and 2 hours sleep. Like, that is a thing of beauty, but probably best kept for a slow vacation. But, maybe a bottle of water followed by 15, what are they saying now? 20 minutes, as NASA recommends in the US, to come back in the afternoon, refreshed, reset, rebooted, recharged, and able to hit the ground running, firing on all cylinders. So there's a perfect example of that. Changing gears between fast and slow. You have the slow moment. It allows you to return to the faster moment, sharper, more on point, better able to cope.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think I love the idea of, working smarter, working better rather than just working longer. We're seeing such a rate of presenteeism, people just feeling like I've got to look like I'm busy, I've got to look like I'm present, I'm going to do the hours at the desk. But I'm a huge advocate for taking breaks, getting outdoors, just the benefit even for sleep at night, getting out for a 10-minute walk, getting sunlight into the retina of your eyes, critical. And it still astounds me at how many team members and how many leaders I talk to, and this is a real revelation to them, especially for leaders, because as a leader, if you're not going for your breaks, then you're sending that unwritten message to everyone around you that this is the way we've got to do it, and so everyone tries to follow suit. But absolutely, we turn up, more switched on, able to work more efficiently, more effectively, with less mistakes, so we get a lot more done. So this leads nicely into, tell me a bit more about, how does the slow movement relate to productivity at work? Because I'm really interested in that.
Well, I think we've touched on some of the expressions of it there. We can look a little bit at creativity now. I mean, there is an eternal and powerful and intimate bond between slowness and creativity, which the greatest thinkers in the arts, science, and business have always understood, that you have to slow down. You need those moments of quiet, tranquility, serenity, silence, moments when you get off the clock and you let your mind wander. We know the science is telling us pretty clearly that in those, let's call them slow moments, right? The brain shifts into a richer, more nuanced, more creative mode of thought that psychologists actually call slow thinking, right? I mean, the clue is in the title.
Yeah.
And I think actually anyone listening to this podcast will recognize that if you think for a moment, when do your best ideas usually come to you? Mm-hmm. I mean, I ask that question whenever I do a public event anywhere on slow in the world. And I tell you, no one anywhere has ever said to me, My best ideas come when I'm juggling 43 emails or when I'm rushing to meet a deadline with the boss or a client breathing down my neck. You know, the number one answer they say, the number one answer you get all over the world to that question, when do your best ideas come to you? When are you at your most creative? Is in the shower.
Yeah.
Or walking the dog or swinging in a hammock on vacation, right? It's in those slow moments. So that's why you're starting to see more and more firms creating times and spaces when staff can slip into that slow tortoise mode during the day. So having quiet rooms where you can go, I don't know, do massage or do yoga or listen to whale music or have a nap, just to change gears so that you tap into the slow and then come back ready to deal with the fast later on.
Yeah, I love what Arianna Huffington talked about in one of her books, I think it was Thrive, about how when they introduced napping rooms, that was greeted with skepticism at Huffington Post, but very soon that they were just booked out. And that idea of taking a recharge nap, or what I sometimes call a non-nap, 20 minutes where you recline, close your eyes, relax. You may not sleep, but your body just gets to, your brain gets to defrag, store away everything that you've been thinking about. And we have our best moments of, the supercomputer in our brains kicking in when we're relaxed. And I loved Manish Zamordi's TED Talk on that as well. Boredom leads to our most brilliant ideas. So lots of power behind that. But do you have any tips around how do people embrace that change or convince their bosses to embrace that change, that actually taking time out to reflect is critical in my day, but how do we make that happen?
Well, I think it's one thing to give the boss, I don't know, a copy of my book or Arianna's book or show them a TED Talk. That's only ever going to get you so far. The only way to persuade a recalcitrant boss with traditional views of speed in the workplace is to get that person to experience it, right? So what I always suggest, or when I'm working with companies, is to run little pilot projects. So rather than saying, okay, the whole team or company has to change tomorrow forever and slow down in this way, no, just say, how about for the next week, we all take a lunch break? Or for the next week, we all turn off our smartphones for, when we leave the office. Or next week, we all find one little slow thing and run it for a week. And at the end of the week, have a debrief where everyone sits around and says, okay, now, what did that feel like? What did it do for us as human beings, as employees, as colleagues, as teammates? Yeah. And once you've tasted that slow works, it becomes so much easier not only to embrace it, but then to go further, right? Because once you've persuaded the recalcitrant boss that slow is a superpower, then he or she is going to be open to trying something else. So I always say, try stuff out. And it can be very small things. I was doing something with a company in the US recently, because this is another really useful tip for slowing down anyone, workplace and beyond, is to spend time in nature. Like we know that being in green spaces has a physiological effect on us, right? It reduces stress, it sharpens concentration, it boosts well-being. It just slows you down in all the right ways. So I always say to people, if you're looking for a quick tip to slow down, if you're like, it's just get out into a park, right? I mean, it's wonderful if you can go do 3 hours of forest bathing in a wood somewhere, but not all of us can. But most of us have a park nearby or some green grass. Go spend a little time there. So I was working with a company in the US recently where they now have a green pause, they call it. So every day for 15 minutes, everyone in the building must leave the building, walk across the street to a glorious park that's sitting right there and spend some time there, leaning up against a tree, barefoot in the grass, whatever. And then and it's interesting talking to the people in that company who were as skeptical as you mentioned earlier. People say, what? No, you got to be, but they began to realize and feel the palpable, deep tidal shift in their own being, right? They would come back sharper, focused, able to interact better and just working better. And they began to look forward to the green pause and feel it was an important lever they could pull every day. And some of them began doing it outside the workplace. So you get this cross-fertilization that happens as well, outside work, inside work, and back and forth.
I love that. That story reminds me of my daughter when she was in Canada, when we were living in Canada in Ottawa. she got the opportunity to go to this forest school, which is the most amazing place. They would bus them out. I got to go one time, and they'd just spend a whole day in nature, surrounded by snow. You know, they learnt to build quinzies, which are kind of like igloos, and to light fires. And we got to tap maple trees and taste maple syrup. It was amazing. And this one moment in the day, they would give each of the children a little square of foam, and they would say, just go and spend your 2 minutes of quiet time. Just go wherever you would like in the distance so we can see you. And they would just put their piece of foam down. They would just sit, lean up against a tree. And I just thought that I literally thought, is this going to work? Are they going to actually be able to do this? But they did. And there was complete silence other than natural sounds. And it was just so heartwarming, you know, as a parent, to see all these precious children just experiencing being in nature, you know, and just watching them. And they also encourage things like, you can climb any tree that you want, as long as you don't climb higher than where an adult can reach. And, you know, they were just allowed to go and be and experience and explore. And
to be
for me,
children.
it was phenomenal. Yeah, it was just amazing.
To be children, right? You know, climb trees, do something without an adult telling them what to do and how to do it better and faster. Yeah.
Yeah. So just amazing. Yeah, I love that. Another thing it reminds me of, and I wanted to talk to you about the topic of technology and its influence. And another favourite place we had when we lived in Canada was a place called Le Nordique, which I believe is the largest outdoor spa in North America. So picture a beautiful venue with multiple restaurants, hot pools, saunas. I think about 15 saunas, 2 steam rooms. They do Aufguss ceremony, which is where they put essential oil infused balls of ice onto the sauna, and it just lets this amazing, you know, pine or mandarin or lavender smell come up, and they spin these towels. And oh, Carl, it's just the most amazing thing. I can't wait to go back and take my children once they're adults. But one thing about this place, Le Nordique, is it's adult only. You have to be 18 and over. You go in wearing your bathing suit with your dressing gown. You leave your phones behind. There are no phones. And I think reflecting on it, like, it's amazing being there in the hot and the cold and the saunas and the relaxation rooms and the Aufguss ceremony. But one of the most beautiful things is that no one has their phone. You know, you go to the restaurant for lunch and you're still there in your dressing gown, and there's fires and there's rugs and all of this beautiful sensory things around you. But no one is looking down at these miniature screens or even thinking about them, because we're in the moment. So I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on technology, mobile devices.
I love technology, right? I'm not a Luddite. I have an iPhone, a Mac, but they're great. But they all come with a little button, red often, that says off, right? And the trouble is, if we don't use the button, the gadgets start to backfire on us, and they end up contaminating the most intimate moments of our lives. They speed us up, they distract us. And so a big part of the slow rethink is forging a healthier, more balanced relationship with tech. Yeah. So instead of having your iPhone, I mean, I've got my iPhone, right? But my notifications are switched off, all of them, right? Which it feels like at first to people can feel like a terrifying change, but actually begin to realize that it's not that hard for most of us to do. But it makes a 180-degree shift in your relationship to the outside world, because when you leave your notifications on, what you're allowing is other people to control your time. When you turn them off, you decide when you want to move away from deep, rich work or reflection or an important, close conversation with another human being to look at your inbox. You decide when to, rather than ping, ping, ping. You're constantly at the mercy of other people's timetables. So that's a first thing people do, is turn off their notifications. Another, you mentioned not seeing people with phones at tables. That's not surprising to hear you say that, because they've shown that when, particularly a one-on-one, 2 people in a conversation together, if there's a phone visible, so just visible, it doesn't have to ring, vibrate, light up, just that those 2 people keep the conversation on a more superficial level. So another one of those examples of a small change making a big difference. Next time you're in a one-on-one with another person, hide your phone, right? That's what pockets are for. Put it in a bag, hide it under a magazine. And that little shift, that little hack will make a big difference to the depth and richness of the encounter you have with the other person. One of my favorite, one of my favorite examples of, what do you want to call it? Like putting speed limits on the information superhighway is this new ritual. I don't know if you've seen it, called stacking. Have you heard of stacking?
Like habit stacking? No,
No. It's
no.
when people go out for coffee together, they all stack up their phone in the middle in a pile of the phone,
Okay.
and whoever grabs the phone first to look at Snapchat or Instagram pays the bill for everybody else. Right?
Yeah,
So
nice.
it's just a nifty way of saying we have this moment here together. We'll never have this moment again. Why ruin it by trying to be in several moments at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And what's really uplifting and telling about the emergence of stacking as a social ritual is that it's something that came not from older people, generations that didn't grow up with screens. This comes from the digital natives who are looking around and saying, yeah, Snapchat's wonderful. I like a bit of TikTok, but no, not all the time. There are times when I want to switch out of turbo mode and go into tortoise mode. I want to go from multimedia to monomedia. I want to go from the speed of software to the speed of human beings. And that shows me that the tectonic plates are moving here, that when new tech comes along, it always takes us a while to create the social norms and rules and protocols around it to get the most from it. And I think we're coming out now of the always on, constantly distracted thing where that was cool and hip and edgy and the thing to be. It's more now, hang on a minute, you're the kind of sad person in the room if you can't stop looking at your phone, I think more and more culturally these days. So I'm optimistic. I think we'll find a better way to be with our screens in future. We already are. Stacking's one example.
Yeah, that is optimistic. I like the sound of that. And let's hope that we head that way, because it's a really common thing. And I think I hadn't heard that fact about phones being visible and that making conversations more superficial, but that makes complete sense to me. And I often talk about that. And interestingly, I have a topic that I'm actually speaking about later today on how to stop technology ruining your life. And again, I'm with you. I have an iPhone. We're doing this via Zoom. I couldn't have had a thriving business for the past 4 years without Zoom. So love technology in so many ways. And yes, I think we need to have limits. I call it a double-edged sword, that we've got to have limits around. And one of the biggest things that I've found really helpful is just making a point of stepping away from people if I'm going to send a text message or, so I'm like, oh, I've got a message. Oh, I need to respond to that. Excuse me a second. And I'll just step away, send the message, and then I'll put it back in my bag, in my pocket, whatever it is, out of sight. And often when I do workshops, I'll just encourage people, we want to build connection today. That's why we're here. Can I invite you to put your phones not just on silent, but ideally on flight mode and out of sight. And, it always creates a little bit of a ripple, but by the end of the workshop or the end of the day, it's one of the biggest things people often comment about as well, and a big takeaway. So really interesting. Yeah. So tell me, moving forward, and for people listening in, I'm not asking for a quick tip, but where would you suggest people start? How do we start to slow down this roadrunner mode?
Ooh, there are lots of places to start. I would start, well, we've talked about tech, right? So start, from tomorrow, wall off an hour a day when your phone is off, just completely off, away. An hour that hitherto you would add it on visible, and try that for a week. So that'd be one place to start with your phone. A second is with your schedule. Pull out your calendar for the next week, and for every day, try and find one thing, the least important thing, and drop it, right? Because we are chronically stuffing our calendars with stuff that's not important, that we won't even remember, that will be utterly meaningless to us in 6 weeks from now. But at the moment we think, oh, I can't drop this. It's not important. Most things are not important. They're just not. They're urgent because that's the world we live in, but they're not important. So just take that pause moment, slow down, think hard and deep about what really matters and what's going to matter in the medium and longer term. And that will help you triage. It'll help you look at each day and think, you know what? I've said yes to that thing because, I don't know, because I'm just people pleasing, or because I don't want to, there are all kinds of reasons we do this. Or sometimes we're just afraid of seeing a gap in our calendar. Don't be afraid. Celebrate it, right? Use that time to get into nature, read a poem, do something slow, because that's another thing I suggest people try and do, is to incorporate some kind of slow ritual in your day that will vaccinate you against the virus of hurry. So just build it in. It doesn't have to be 4 hours of meditation. It can be 10 minutes. It might be doing some knitting. Might be reading poetry. For me, it's often just sketching, just drawing something, being forced to stop and look hard at an object in the world and render it in lines on a page. That has a kind of tranquilizing effect on me personally. Other people will find that a nightmare, but you find your own slow ritual, build it into the schedule, embed it in there, and it will help you navigate the rest of your day in a more serene spirit.
I love that. And I often talk about daily non-negotiables. And one of mine is to start the day just with a 4-minute stretch. And actually, discovered it in Canada. Life was not going well. There was a lot of pressure trying to get the kids out of the door in the morning. And I realized that, I really need to change my morning routine. So I set my alarm a little bit earlier, and just for the length of one uplifting song, I would just do a stretch and breathe and kind of do habit stacking, think about what I was grateful for, think about what I was looking forward to. And I found that little start in the day made a massive impact. And there's another little story that came to mind before when you were talking about nature bathing. I had a client who had a lot of stress going on in her work life, and we talked about what were things that actually brought her joy. And she said she really loved just walking on the grass, like barefoot, just actually being on grass barefoot. But she said she never did it. And she set up this really small intervention where she would put the kettle on in the morning for a cup of tea. She would walk out across her deck, cross the grass just to her back fence, touch the plants of the back fence, walk back in again. It took 30 seconds. And she said it just transformed how she felt, for the rest of that morning, for the rest of that day, just literally grounding herself. So just little ideas, I guess I just feel prompted to share, because I think it's these little micro moments in our day that make a big difference, right?
Because I do think people hear about slowing down and they often assume wrongly that you have to become the Dalai Lama, you're a meditating hour. No, often just a little pivot of slowness, a little injection of slowness, like walking down to the end of your garden, touching some flowers and coming back inside a minute, can make an enormous difference to the whole tone and tenor of your day. And it can just color everything with the technicolor joy of slowness, and it doesn't have to be a massive thing. You got up 4 minutes earlier to do some stretching. That's people. And I speak as a parent, my children are older now, but I remember when I was younger, people had said, as a parent, set your alarm early. You'd think, you got to be kidding me. I actually need more sleep. What are you talking about? But that's a false economy, because by setting yourself to get up even just 4 minutes earlier, if you use those 4 minutes wisely, if you apply them in a slow manner to slow things, man, that's going to set you up to soar and thrive the rest of the day.
I totally agree. And for me, the key message I'm taking away is not to beat myself up for the times that I am doing things fast. That's okay at times, but just to me, I sort of picture this something sliding in and out, oscillating in and out of some things. We're fast, we're switched on, we're delivering, and then just coming back in. And I think it's that recharging that allows us to enable us to power back up. I often talk about, we live in quite a rural area. We have a lot of native forest around us here in New Zealand. And there's this one bird called the kereroo, New Zealand wood pigeon. It's big, huge, beautiful bird. And it does this amazing thing, Carl, where it flies almost vertical and then pauses. And then it heads off with this amazing acceleration. I think they just do it for fun. It just looks amazing. They just fly up, kind of pause, and then swoop off. And I often talk to leaders about the power of the pause and mastering the power of the pause, just a moment of self-reflection or just reflection, so that we are heading off in the right direction rather than just the constant wheel of spinning. So today's been a beautiful reminder of that and practical ways to apply it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
So if people wanted to reach out, find out more, follow your work, what's the best way to do that?
The easiest way, I've got everything in one place on a link tree, which is my name altogether, Carl Honoré, carlhonoré.info. So carlhonoré.info. And I think actually it also, if you go to inpraiseofslow.com, you'll end up in the same place. So there you'll find videos, courses. I made a TED course on how to slow down, workbooks. There's everything more than you would ever want to know about me and slow in one place.
Yeah, perfect. And highly recommend this book, In Praise of Slowness. And the 2 TED Talks that you've done, amazing. So just as we wrap up, can I just ask you if you had one final comment or thought to share with our listeners? What would that be?
2 thoughts. One is a quote from me, which is that in a world addicted to speed, slowness is a superpower. And then the final quote comes from Mae West, the screen starlet from the black and white age, who once said, anything worth doing is worth doing slowly.
Yes. I'm reflecting on that, and there's so much truth to that. Both of those.
There's a lot of. She knew a thing or two about life. Did old Mae West?
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's just been such a joy, pleasure. Really appreciate you connecting across the time zones and sharing with us today. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you very much. Hope to catch up again soon.
Great. So thanks for tuning in. That's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.